Hello and welcome to episode 16 of Montague Island Books. And I'm delighted to say we've got a lovely guest today. Just to tell you a little bit about our guest, our author guest, she's an award-winning author of fiction for young people. Her first novel, Dark Ride, won the RONA Young Adult Book of the Year and a Waverton Good Read Award. Cracks and then Hold Your Breath garnered rave reviews and was shortlisted for 11 different awards. Our author is also writer in residence at East Barnet School, and she's been a journalist for over 20 years and has written for many broadsheet newspapers and glossy magazines. So I'm very pleased to welcome this week Caroline Green. Welcome to the island.
Hi, it's nice to meet you. I'm afraid that's a little bit of an old biography though, because I've had a whole those books and I've written. I've had 4 psychological thrillers. One of them was a Sunday Times and USA Today bestseller called In a Cottage in a Wood, and I write those as Cass Green. And I've got a brand new series that's got a supernatural police crime type thing, and I write those as CS Green. I'm not a journalist anymore either, so I should have said you
need to update your Amazon because that was off Amazon.
Is that on Amazon? Blimey. Yeah, no, it's a bit out of date.
That's great. So that's great that you've sort of updated a little bit, because I say quite often these things do go out of date and what have you. Also, it gives a website address, but I couldn't get on your website. What is your website?
It's Caroline Green Writer.
Right, they've got it down as carolinegreen.net.
Sorry about that. I think that the confusion is I've got different writing names as well on Amazon, so that's probably still from my old YA books. So it's a bit confusing because I've got all these different names.
Is it different personalities as well? Or?
Well, I think that I start to worry if that was the case. So hopefully not. Hopefully it's all just me.
That's great. So do you want to go into a bit more detail and tell us, you just give us a bit of an overview there, but tell us about your books, what your current book is, what you're currently working on, and, where people can contact you.
Absolutely. So at the moment, my latest book came out just a couple of months ago, and it's called Sleep Tight, and it's under the name CS Green, and it's about a young police officer called DC Rose Gifford, who has grown up in a household with her grandmother, who is a sort of a fake medium. She's kind of a bit of a con woman. And Rose wanted to turn away from that kind of life completely and became a police officer because it felt like couldn't have been more different from where she came from. When a very strange crime occurs in London that the Met are investigating, where a woman has been suffocated in her bed in a locked room. Wow. She's been reporting strange nightmares and things before then. Rose is investigating, and she discovers that there's a whole branch of the Met Police that investigates strange crimes. So she kind of is forced to come full circle to the things she tried to step away from. So that's a lot of fun. And I'm just currently I'm about to do the edits on the second book in the series, which will be out next year.
So the first book, is that available in paperback or just in format? Well,
it's actually a hardback. It's the first hardback. It's the 9th book that I've written. It's the first time I've had a hardback, but it's available on ebook, hardback, and Audible as well. And the paperback is out in November. So there will be a paperback at some point. So.
And I know a lot of people love looking forward to the audiobooks. How did you find that process?
Oh, well, it's my 4th audiobook now. And I've tried and have a bit of a role in choosing who I want, because it's really important to have the right reader. And there's a fantastic actor called Lisa Coleman who read one of my books, In a Cottage in a Wood, and I just loved her voice and just really felt she'd be right for this. So she's signed up to do all 3 in this series. So I'm really pleased about that.
Lovely, that's good. Yeah, it's all you can start listening to. I'm not a great fan of audiobooks, but I've listened to some, and some just like turn me off just by the narrator, So it really is. it's
Me
a hard
too.
job because you get
Yeah.
your own voice in you, especially if you've read the book, you get your own voices in your head, don't you? So
Yeah, I'm always sending them back because I don't like my voice. Very fussy.
great. How can people contact you on social media?
I'm on Twitter as at Caroline S. Green. And I've got a public Facebook page, which is just Caroline Green Writer. And I've got a website, which is carolinegreenwriter.com. And you can contact me via all of those things.
Super, wonderful. So shall we have a look now at what books you're going to take to Montague Island? Now, just to give yourself and anyone listening for the first time or watching for the first time, Montague Island is a sort of made-up island. It was created by Mike Craven. When he was writing the book that just recently came out last year, and he based it around Cumbria, and Montague Island was an island he created. So that's where I've taken the idea from, and Mike was okay about it. And when you arrive on the island, there is a Kindle waiting for you with a set of Mike Craven's books as well, just for that little nod. So you're going to be taking 7 books with you of your own choice that have influenced you or from childhood, etc. So what would your first book be, Caroline?
Well, the first one I've gone for is actually a childhood book, and it's a book called The Didacoy by Murmur. Now, this book came out when I was 7, and I read it shortly afterwards from the part of the Puffin Club, which I was in as a little girl. I'm sure lots of people our sort of age were. And it's a book. There was a huge TV series in the 70s as well called Kizzy that was about the main character. And Kizzy, the main character in the book, she's half Romany, and she lives with her great grandmother in a caravan, and they have an old horse. And her grandmother dies, and Kizzy is suddenly having to be integrated into the sort of care system. And it's a book, and it's quite. I mean, I'm not sure now whether 7-year-olds would be reading it, because it's quite dark in that there's a lot. She gets bullied horribly, and I think the reason I chose it is because I think it was the first time as a little girl that I really sort of came to think about the idea of bigotry and prejudice, and it just had the most enormous impression on me. I can remember being really little and literally lying in my bed, just unable to stop thinking about this little girl and who was the same age as me, and I think it sort of shaped how I see the world to some extent, as books at that age do, I think. But yeah, so that's a book that I think it actually partly shaped who I've become, really.
Yeah, that's great. And to be thinking of bigotry and prejudice at 7 years old was quite forward thinking, really, wasn't it?
Well, I think when you're that age, I couldn't really think about it. I couldn't in any way frame it in anything because I was too little. But all I could think about was the unfairness, and that's what children do understand, I think, isn't it? Yeah. And the sort of the sheer unfairness of how people were treating this character was it just sort of overwhelmed me, it really, really did. I haven't reread it a very long time, and I think I will. But there is a danger, isn't there, that when you reread something beloved from so long ago, that you just see it so differently. And I don't. Yeah, I've done that before. I've gone back to things I've loved and I've not liked them as much, so I don't want to spoil it.
No, that's it. But hopefully, once you start reading again, it'll bring back memories for you as well of times gone by and stuff. So it's definitely worth giving it a try, and you might find bits of the story that you didn't when you first read it. So you might interpret it in a different way. So definitely worth a shot, but a good choice. And what's your second book going to be?
And these aren't really in any date order. These are just it's going to go a bit random now. So the next book I'm going to choose is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters, which is a ghost story, which I love. And my very first book that I got published, it wasn't the first book that I'd written, because I wrote 2 books before that never got anywhere. Wow. It's called Dark Ride, and it's got a sort of supernatural kind of thing. And for some reason, I don't know why, I seem to keep being drawn to this, because I've come full circle with these adult books now. They're police procedurals, but with this spooky kind of undercurrent. And The Little Stranger is it's narrated by a young doctor whose name we never learn. And he is it's set in the 1950s, and there's a big country house, a real sort of, country pile that's kind of falling down, owned by this family of siblings who are really struggling with the upkeep. And it's all about that sort of post-war period when these stately homes, they were really fading and they didn't have the staff anymore and people didn't want to work in them anymore. And he gets called at the beginning of the book because one of the servants has claimed to have seen a ghost in the house and had a fright. And he becomes embroiled in this family's business in a way that there's a very sort of strong, unreliable narrator sort of theme to it. And you don't really know what he's about for the whole thing. And that's a book that literally, it was so ridiculous. There was one night I was reading it really late, and I got so scared I couldn't go to sleep as a grown woman. It was ridiculous. But I've read it 2 or 3 times now because it's just fantastic. She's one of my favourite authors, so I really love her.
And I think there's a thing as well, a connection there with your psychological thrillers, because when you say about the narrator that's withholding a secret, you kind of get that quite a lot with psychological thrillers as well, don't you? So maybe that's where that's sort of coming from as well.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, no, you said you wrote before you got sort of published, you'd written a couple of other books. Have you kept them, and have you looked back at them to see whether you could sort of update them?
Yeah, I've looked back at them, and even though at the time it was kind of heartbreaking that I couldn't get them published, now I can see that they weren't up to scratch. I really wasn't. They weren't ready to go out into the world at all. So I think it was painful, but part of that whole process of sort of learning, really. But yeah, no, they won't be seeing the light of day at any time.
Have you used any of the characters in any of your more recent books? No.
They were just
sidelined.
Yeah, I think they were just practicing. I think they really do. Yeah. With creating characters as well.
But great when you can look back at them as well and see how far you progressed.
Yeah. That is quite nice. Yeah, that is.
Okay. Yeah. So what's your book number 3 going to be, Caroline?
Book number 3, which came out long before The Little Stranger, is, if you made me choose one of this list, I might ask me that at the end, I don't know. But anyway, is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which came out in the 90s, I think it was the 90s. And I must have reread it 4 or 5 times. It's the story of a young man. It's American. It was Donna Tartt's kind of first book. It's a young man who goes to gets a scholarship to a prestigious American college. And he's very much, he's come from quite a sort of working class background, but he falls in with this crowd of people there that are very wealthy and are very wild. And they have these evenings where they're all studying ancient Greek, where they have bacchanals and have wild, and not inevitably, but as it's a thriller, there's a murder, and it's all about the sort of slow decline and the moral compass of this main character and how he gets pulled into these glamorous, corrupt but glamorous people's life. And it's everything about it is brilliant. The characters are brilliant. The plot is gripping. The writing's beautiful. The setting descriptions I use because I teach creative writing, and I'm always using examples from The Secret History because I just think it's perfection.
And I think the moral there as well, isn't it? Because I think so many people get pulled into sort of what we would call glamorous lives and then find out the criminal.
Yeah, it's a real be careful what you wish for sort of scenario, because he thinks these people are something to aspire to, but they're rotten, really. Some of them are anyway.
Yeah, can definitely connect people with that even today. So it's
yes,
it shows, doesn't it? So I like the sound of that, but that sounds interesting. So what's book number 4 going to be?
And book number 4 is The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins, which I've read. And it's funny because in the real midst of the grimmest part of the first lockdown, I found myself turning to this series and rereading it all from the beginning again. And there was something so escapist about it that really kind of took me away from the world a bit. But basically, The Hunger Games is about a young woman called Katniss Everdeen, who she lives in a future world, which is America, but it's called Panem. And every year, everybody has to take part in this reality TV show where teenagers and children have to like fight to the death. And she has to go and take part in these games. And the sort of breadth of imagination in it just blew me away. And you cannot put it down. Have you read The Secret?
I have, yeah. A long time ago. I must admit, I remember the basics of it, and you've explained it really well, but not the sort of detail of it. So it's probably something I need to read again.
They're just such good. One of the reasons I've chosen it is because for me, sort of developing as a writer, at that point, it made me so badly want to write something with a bit of a dystopian theme and that kind of exciting plot. And I wrote a book called Cracks, which has got a dystopian kind of theme to it. And I so wanted to write a book like that because it inspired me in that way, which I think doesn't always happen when I've loved reading something, but certain things fire my imagination in a way that make me think, oh, I want to do that.
And as you say, it's just total escapism, especially what was going on at the time. But it's also something that you can, in a way, link back to reality, particularly the madness of, of the media and what have you. And as I say, you would think that of what we've gone through the last 12 months, you wouldn't think that dystopian books would be of much interest, but they are. People are using them to just escape.
I think that's true. I think that's really interesting, that whole question of what we're going to want to read about this period. Because I'm talked to my editor at HarperCollins, Phoebe. Asked her, should we be, if we're writing a book set now, should we be including the pandemic? And she said, to be honest with you, she said, I think we're all sick of it. We don't need it, but it's too soon, I think. It's maybe a bit too soon.
Yeah,
for us
I
to
think
be
you're
reading.
right. I think another maybe 15 or 20 years time, I think everybody will be writing about it, just to, get all bits and pieces in that, that they can connect with, and the lack of identity because everybody's covered with a face mask and, and the distance. And, so I think it'll say maybe 15, 20 years time, everyone will be jumping on, right? Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, I think it might happen for sure. Yeah. It's not quite yet.
No, it's too. Everybody just wants to get rid of it for now, don't they? And what's your next book going to be, Caroline?
And again, this is another one that influenced me in terms of wanting to write something. So when I was writing YA fiction, I was I came up with a proposal that got turned down, and I came up with some ideas that my agent at the time didn't really like, and I was feeling a little bit lost. And I'd been reading a lot of psychological thrillers for adults, and the one that stood out for me, and still does, to be honest, almost beyond all others, is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. Always looks like it should be Gillian Flynn, but apparently it's Gillian Flynn. And I read that book quite a lot. I read it quite early, only because I used to listen to an American podcast about writing. It was two Random House editors in America, and they talked books. And in the days before there were a lot of podcasts, it was one of the ones that you could find about books. And they were raving about this book that at this point wasn't big in America, wasn't big here. And I liked the sound of it. And it just really blew me away. I just thought it was so exciting. It's got, I think, twists. We can get a bit sick of twists now, but it's got a killer twist that I never saw coming. And it really made me want to start writing something different and move in a new direction. And and I'm so glad I did that. I think that's been a really good move for me. So I think reading books of that ilk pushed me towards this new career that I've got.
And it's such a popular genre, psychological thrillers. Again, that seems to be another one that really seems to have boomed in the last 12 months. When you look now, there's so many psychological thrillers coming out.
Yeah.
So again, maybe it's sort of connected with the time, and everybody wants just something that they can escape in, as in get into other people's minds. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think that's exactly it.
That's it. And you were talking about your changing, from sort of, young adult into the more sort of adult psychological thrillers. How do you go on with your writing process? Do you have a strict sort of timetable of, right, now it's 9 o'clock, so I start work, or is it more when ideas come to you?
Well, things are different now because I'm under contract. So I have other jobs. As I said, I do a lot of teaching of creative writing. So I have like periods of time when something will have to be done, and then I have to really go for it. I am quite disciplined about it, but I have to fit it in sort of around all the other sort of jobs that I have. Really, I've got 2 school jobs as well. Before the pandemic, my sort of sacrosanct writing routine was to go to the British Library and to ensconce myself in there for the day. But I haven't been, I mean, it's only just reopened anyway. I'm not even sure it's reopened in quite the same way as it was. But I kind of had to work at home. So I bought myself some big headphones, these big headphones.
Yeah.
And for some reason now, if I put those on, I have to wear those. I have to sort of tune the house out. But I think it's deadlines kind of really motivate me. It depends on if I know that I've got to get something written and done by a certain amount of time, I can be fairly disciplined, I think. So
you like the power of the deadline, like working toward the deadline, yeah?
I do, and I think that does come from the fact that I did used to be a journalist, and I respond to deadlines. I'm not very good when I don't have them.
Here's a question for you. It's probably putting you on the spot a bit, this one, but you say about, your creative writing teaching. What is the biggest tip or thought process for somebody who would be wanting to start out in creative writing?
Well, a couple of things that I would say on sort of from the most basic level of what I think you need to be doing, and people don't always do this, is you have to read and read and read. Mm-hmm. And I've been on, before I was published, I've been away on creative writing courses with, and I'm learning from other people. And I've been really amazed by the fact that so many people say, well, I don't really have time to read as well. I'm busy writing. And for me, it's absolutely essential. They just go with each other hand in hand. You can't possibly expect to be a good writer unless you read. That's the thing. So try and make time for it and read in the genre and the age group or whatever that you're wanting to write, and get so familiar with what's out there and what's being published. So that's the first thing. And the other thing is, this isn't very original, but just to try and be resilient even when it's really, really hard, because what's going to separate the person that gets published from the one that doesn't is that the one that gets published will take the knocks and keep going. Because I mentioned that it was the 3rd book that I'd written, but the one that did get published, Dark Ride, and actually won, as you said, won a couple of awards, that got rejected 37 times before it got picked up. So, and I'm not particularly tough. I'm a bit of a softie, so I did find it really, really hard. Yeah. But there was I'm quite stubborn. That's the thing. I'm not tough, but I am stubborn. And there was some little part of me that just was like, well, I'll show you, and didn't really bring myself to stop.
And so you obviously believed in your book as well. So that was, yeah.
Yeah. So go for that inner stubbornness if you can. That's the thing. And don't expect it to necessarily be easy, because for most people it isn't. You hear stories in the newspaper about, like a bus driver who's written their first book and then wins the Booker Prize or whatever. But that's not the overwhelming majority of times. That's not how it works for people. It's getting rejected, bouncing back up and having another go.
Yeah. And it's that staying positive, isn't it? I suppose keeping positive and just, as you say, keep going with you, keep staying resilient and keep going with your head down. So that's great tips for anyone who's watching, and hopefully people will put that into process. So I think we're now at I think we're at book 6. So what's your next book?
Yeah, so I'm actually going to go for some writing books now. So my next book is called Into the Woods by John Yorke. John Yorke used to be a script writer for all sorts of soaps like EastEnders and Coronation Street. He's now a kind of storytelling guru, professor type person who wrote this amazing book about how we respond to story structure as human beings, and his belief that we're basically hardwired to respond to stories because it's kind of how we process the world. And I just found it, I've reread this several times. I recommend it to all my students endlessly. I've been to see him speak a couple of times. He's a bit of a hero of mine, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, I really recommend it to anyone out there who is, who is thinking about getting published, or just who wants to know a little bit about plotting and how to, the nuts and bolts of how to put something together like that. I really highly recommend that one.
Great, yeah, that sounds good. Have you had a go at script writing, or do you prefer the sort of novel approach?
Well, when I first started out, I used to sort of often say, oh, at some point I really want to have a go at doing that. But yeah, I don't know. I sort of not sure I would really want to do it, because I feel like there are lots of things about it that I don't know how to do that. I don't know even how it should look or anything. Yeah. I would need to properly go on a course, and what I'd really like is for my books to be taken by some other very clever person on the screen. So I don't know, maybe at some point, but not. Yeah. For some reason, the desire has kind of faded a little bit. Maybe it's because I'm getting published, and I'm very lucky in that sense. And
yeah, I suppose it's a bit like asking a joiner to build a house, isn't it? It's it's totally sort of different sort of skill levels and different outtake, really, isn't it, when you're looking at screenwriting?
I think it is. I mean, a lot of my writer friends are looking into doing that. Some people have done the scripts for their own books in another form on TV or whatever. I think I'm gonna I do really love writing dialogue, so I was sort of thinking before, maybe that's maybe I should give it a go. But yeah.
Great, interesting. Well, it sounds like a great book. So what's your final book going to be, Caroline?
My final book is another one about writing, and it's On Writing by Stephen King, which is
I've heard a lot about this. I've not read it, but I've heard a lot about it.
Have you had any other people recommending it like me?
I don't think so. No, not that I can remember. So it's
right.
always interesting. People always seem to come up with, you get a couple of sort of regular ones, but people always come up with very varied books. So that's one of the great things I enjoy about making the show, because everybody's got different choices.
Yeah. Well, it's not been around, I think maybe it's about 15 years old, something like that, I think. I'm not sure, but it's basically just him talking about his writing process and how it all started. So there's all the sort of biographical bit, which is really fascinating to hear about him, and him and his wife with no money at all when his first book Carrie was sold. They were so broke, and he was so close to giving up, really. And then his life just changed.
Yeah.
So part of it is biographical about that, but part of it is just all about how he sees the writing process. And there are just so many gems in there, and I go back to it again and again. And when I was slightly struggling to start the second book in my series, because the first one was another departure. I keep having these departures with my career because it keeps it interesting.
Yeah.
And it was such fun writing this police procedural with this spooky storyline. And then I was very happy to get a 3-book deal for it. But when I had to come to write the second book, the first book wasn't even out. It felt like it was all the pressure felt quite hard. And I thought, I wish I could remember that kind of really joyful feeling I had when I just threw myself into the first one. And then I remembered that in On Writing, Stephen King says, write the first draft of the book with the door closed and the second draft of the book with the door open. So the idea being that it's just for you, the first one. You're just in a room and it's you just having a lot of fun with a computer and getting down all the stuff that's in your head, and to not overthink the outside world at all. And even though I'd read the book several times and I'd read that advice and thought, oh yeah, that's good advice or whatever, on this occasion, it really properly resonated and it helped me. I thought, okay, the outside world, I don't have to think about that at the moment. I'll worry about that when I've got the first draft down.
Yeah.
And so it's full of gems.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, it is on my TBR mountain to read, but I will have to sort of advance it up a little bit, I think, and have a read of it. So I've got to ask this question while we're on the Stephen King question. So what's your favourite Stephen King book?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say I was in terms of his actual general output. I haven't read lots and lots and lots of them. I think probably Misery is probably my favourite. Considering, how many he's written, I think I've probably only read 4 or 5, which is not that many. There was one that, and I can't remember the name of it, that came out about 10 years ago, and it was about a man who suddenly develops all this ability as an artist. Don't know if you know the one. I really love that one, but I can't remember the name. No,
I'm not sure. I remember a little bit about the book, but as you say, that there are so, and to be honest, although he tends to be known as scary books, I tend to like the ones where it's sort of less scary, more story.
I do. I do too. I'm quite squeamish about like really proper horror, so I'm not great with. I haven't read all the the really scary ones like It, so that wouldn't be for me. But I'd like the one that you probably read this one then, the one about Kennedy. I can't remember the name of it. The one with the date.
Yeah, it's December. It's something December 63, isn't it? The day Kennedy got assassinated. Yeah,
and it doesn't really help that they do their dates differently to us. So those I thought that was really, really good as well. Right. Yeah, he's such a great guy. He's just a really great guy as well as being an amazing author, I think.
Yeah, amazing. So we've got your 7 books now, which are all great choices, and I love the variety you've chosen. So. Now, we believe on the island there is, obviously it's off the coast of Cumbria, but you've only got 1 day, one hour a day of electricity. But you can take with you a CD. So that can be music, it can be, like an audio book on CD or anything like that. So what would your CD be?
I had to think long and hard about this, but I decided to go for well, it's not a CD that I listen to anymore, but an album that I will listen to all the way through, which these days we don't do that very much, do we? So much. And it's for me, it's my balm for the soul album. And it's an album called Murmur by REM, which came out in 1983 when I was a teenager. And it's just, there's so many songs on there that I don't know what it is about it, but there's something about that album that if I'm feeling if something's happened that's really upset me, or I'm just exhausted, for some reason, listening to that, I get something from it, something uplifting, or just, it's not really uplifting. It's more a comfort. It really is. It really, it's just one that I just turn to again and again and again. Right. I mean, I really thought about this because I thought, but I also really like dancing. So I take something that I'd be dancing to, but I thought, no, go for the thing that you really do go back to over and over again. So
I like your comfort blanket. Yeah,
it's a real old one, but still as good as it was when it came out.
Don't remember the actual album, but REM generally are amazing, aren't they? They're great. Really enjoy it. So that's great. So you'll be able to play that nice and loud on the island. And next we've got a DVD. So again, this can be a film, it can be a TV series, or a live concert or whatever. So what DVD would you take with you?
Oh, I was thinking only of a film. Would it be cheating very badly to have a film and a TV series?
Well, we'll hear both of them and then we'll let you decide.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, if it was no, I'm not gonna cheat. I'm gonna go for the TV series. If I can have the whole of thing rather than just like one DVD.
The box set kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna go for Breaking Bad. Because I just think it's one of the all-time TV shows as far as I'm concerned. I could watch it again and again. I think I must have seen it 3 times now. I just feel like it's taught me loads about storytelling and about character. I just, I don't think I'll ever tire of it. I really, really, really love Breaking Bad.
Good choice, and you'll have the full series, so it'll last you quite a while. Talking about TV series, we see all the you know, the police procedural things that come on TV nowadays. How do you know, because you've sort of recently started writing police procedurals, how do you go on for sort of getting your information? Because, you know, you look at Line of Duty, there's so many acronyms and things. Do you have a little black book of contacts, or do you do your own research? Or
well, it's funny, you know, I did a workshop on this a couple of weeks ago, actually, for the London Writers Cafe, about how to create, you know, believable characters. Now, my husband is a criminal lawyer, and he just gets so irritated by his misrepresentations of his job on screen. It's just so really funny. You're just you can't even watch the whole program. So I really felt very strongly I wanted to get my facts right. So I did tons of reading. There are some very good books out there there's actually one, I've forgotten the name of it now, but it's basically on police procedure for writers, written by, it's called Michael Byrne is the author's name, if anyone wants to find the book. But yeah, it's called Michael Byrne. So I read lots of things. I asked everybody I knew who had any kind of police contact, and I was incredibly lucky because a good friend of mine, her husband is a traffic policeman, but he wasn't going to be right for this. But he had an old friend who he no longer worked with, who was on the murder squad in Southampton. So he didn't work for the Met, as my character does, but and he was just the most fantastic contact. I would send him so many emails asking him for details about things. Yeah, so I did tons of reading. Also, Line of Duty, enjoyable though it is not remotely realistic, but there are certain dramas that are. Scott and Bailey was very, very good. My husband said that was the most realistic one he'd ever seen. I watched things like 24 Hours in Police Custody. And there was one about the Met that was on for a while that was really good. So watching those is a really good way to understand the processes. And
24 Hours in police custody is great because you know that it's real. You know, you say with Line of Duty and what have you, it's it's made for TV, isn't it? But you know, police custody, it's like you get in the raw stuff, so to speak. So you know,
and you can't believe that people give their permission to be filmed, can you? I mean,
that's the mad thing, isn't it? Because you think, well, they're filming this, and obviously the person knows it's being filmed, but at the end of the day, they've done some awful things on video and they're agreeing for it to be shown.
I know. What were they thinking? I know.
Crazy. So now the next thing you can take to the island with you is, and this can be absolutely anything, but a food or meal that would comfort you or remind you of home or, you know, of childhood, etc. So what would you take for a food or meal?
I'm afraid it's going to be very, very boring and disappointing, but I just don't think you can really argue with hot buttered toast.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's the food of the gods. And I think, you know, very suspicious of anyone who doesn't like toast.
Yeah.
So, it would, and I would be fine if I just had some nice butter. I'd be all right. I wouldn't be cheeky and ask for anything else. As long as I had some decent butter and some nice toasty bread, a good way of toasting it, I think I could probably last for a while on that. I mean, I'd probably get scurvy and die, but apart from that, I'd be happy, I think, for a while.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you can't beat toast any time of day, can you? Know, be it first thing in the morning, last thing at night. Exactly. You know, toast will always sort of satisfy you. So I like that choice. And finally, we've got, again, this can be literally anything. We've had some weird and wonderful things. But a luxury item, what would you take as a luxury item?
Well, my luxury item is it's not very expensive, so it's not going to break the bank for me to take my luxury item. And it's not really two things, but so it would have to be moleskin notebooks, that size. Has to be that size, lined. And if I was allowed to take a superb Pentel pen as well, if I could sneak that inside the notebook, that would be great. So these are what I use to write down my thoughts, to do story ideas.
So do you put them all on pen and paper and then transfer them to computer? Or?
No. I write everything on the computer, but this is for thoughts, really. This is for sort of thinking things through. It's a bit of a diary. It kind of, I just organize myself in it. So yeah, I feel incredibly lost if I never not have one. So I would feel incredibly lost if I didn't have one. So.
Yeah, great choice though, as you say, and you didn't have plenty of time to make notes and write ideas down. So that's great, and you've got to have your favourite pen, haven't you? You've got.
Yeah. I mean, I'm quite a sort of awkward writer. I'm not right-handed. I'm not left-handed, but I write awkwardly for a right-handed person, and it means that I get covered in ink all the time. So I have to have a pen.
So.
It's really annoying, isn't it? So and I have to make sure that I'm not going to get completely covered in ink and smudge it everywhere. So I have to use those pens. Yeah,
good idea. Well, that's great. Well, it's been lovely to hear all of your different choices, and what you're going to take with the island with you to the island. So just finally, before we go, do you want to just tell everybody, give everybody a little reminder about your books, what you've got in the process for coming out, and how they can contact you?
Oh, thank you. Yes, so my YA books are written as Caroline. I've got 4 psychological thrillers as Cass Green, and my latest book is called Sleep Tight by C.S. Green, and that is out in hardback, on Kindle and on audio. And it's out in paperback in November. I have also I've got a book coming out for 7 to 9 year old children, which is very exciting. I've never written for that age before, in January. So I've got it's about a boy and a dog who swap bodies. So there's a dog in my brain, and I just got the artwork for that yesterday, which is, I've never had illustrated fiction before, so that's wildly exciting. Great. So I've got these different, and that's going to be as Caroline. And I'm on Twitter as Caroline S. Green, and I have a public Facebook page where you can come and say hello. You can send me a message, which is just Caroline Green Writer. And there's also an email address on my website, which is carolinegreenwriter.com. If anyone wants to drop me an email. Or you can.
And obviously the bookshops and what have you are starting to open up now, but obviously they've been closed for a long time. So if people are interested in getting signed copies, can they contact you via your social media pages? Yeah, I know for a fact that you can get there are some signed copies. If you come to my onto my public Facebook page or Twitter, I can direct you in the right direction for that. Brilliant. Well, that's great. So just to let people know, yesterday we had 2 shows this week. Yesterday we had Jonathan Mayhew, or J.E. Mayhew, and next up we've got on the 25th Anita Kirk, and then on the 27th of May we've got Malcolm Hollindrake. So a couple of exciting ones to come up as well. But thank you very much to us today, Caroline. Really enjoyed it. And lovely speaking to you, and we'll see you again soon. Thank you for having me. Enjoy your time on the island. I will do, I think. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.